I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Got little pots of pipe spread out all over the lot, 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Well, I got the seed from Mexico. Stick it in some dirt and let it grow. Put it in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need to breathe. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. We keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this between you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I can't tell my boss or I'll get fired. I don't grow much, just what I use. I work all day, and when I'm through, I smoke some marijuana from my yard. Now the policeman, he wants to talk to me. He says, how you gonna smoke up all that weed? He says, money's what you're in it for. Don't you know we're in a war? Now I'm gonna haul your ass downtown with me. I said, hey man, what is it to you? How do I infringe on what you do? Well, I beg your pardon if you're offended by my garden, but I just can't grow Prozac in my yard. So I grow my own medicine in my yard. I give some to my neighbor for his heart. Share it with my grandma who keeps it from her son, 'cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Well, now there's nothing growing in my yard, 'cause cops took all my land and both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in the parking lot who's growing marijuana in his yard. Oh, anyone can grow it in their yard. Hey, I can show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government, and I'll grow marijuana in our yard. Let's grow some marijuana.
Okay, here we are again doing another episode of Pot Talk TV. And all that marijuana you saw behind me there was marijuana that I grew in my yard that the police came and confiscated. And if you notice, Santa Claus was in my field, and he liked my pot, and he liked it a lot. And he wanted to give it as Christmas presents, but the police took it. So all you people out there, it's time for us to all take a stand, and we want repeal of a law that should have never been. We don't want legalization. Legalization still means that people like you and me are going to be going to jail if we get caught growing it or having it. But they're going to turn it over and license some big corporation to supply an inferior grade of marijuana that nobody really wants to smoke anyway. So it's time for you people out there to get off your butts and start saying, we want the law repealed. We want it to go back the way it was before they ever made this law, which meant any farmer could grow as much as he wanted, and nobody went to jail for it, and it was pretty much free. So we want a law that should have never been, that's unconstitutional, repealed. And we want all the marijuana prisoners released, and we don't want any more going in. And I hope you people enjoy my pot field, because there's some beautiful pictures of it. And that was very early in the season. It actually got very, very big, and it was beautiful, and I was quite proud of it. Unfortunately, the police came along and took my marijuana. But here I am with Paula again, and the love of my life. What do you got to say, Paula?
sometimes Joe says, how did I ever meet you? How did I get so lucky? And I say, Joe, you got busted. And that's how it happened, because I was not by any means a pro-marijuana person. I was more into saying lots of mantras, and when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi taught transcendental meditation, I think as a matter of making a uniform policy for the Transcendental Meditation Organization, I believed they probably had, that he had to say that. When the International Monetary Fund goes to other countries and offers them loans, one of the first things a country has to do in order to get a loan from the International Monetary Fund is make cannabis illegal. So that should be something that gets people to think right from there. But that's what I always say, Joe, you got busted. That's how you met me.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that they want to keep it illegal in all these countries, our country, when the founding fathers took this country from England for a short time that they did, they were growing hemp, and hemp was making all America an independent country. Hemp was all the clothes that the people in America were wearing were called homespun. That was made from hemp. The sails of all our ships, the ropes for all our ships, so much was dependent on hemp back in them days. And in the 40s, what was it? That magazine?
Victory, right?
No, the magazine that was.
Popular Science?
Oh, no, Popular Science put out a magazine saying that hemp was going to be the big industry of the future, the billion-dollar industry. This was back in the 40s. And all the farmers, had they not made hemp illegal, all the farmers who've lost their farms now, instead of losing their farms, would have been making a lot of money, and they'd still have their farms. It was to kill farming in this country. It was to bring in the police state that we have.
And consolidate a monopoly with the pharmaceuticals.
Right, and consolidate a monopoly with the pharmaceuticals, like Paula just said. So we want all you people out there to get off your butts and start getting on all these politicians. We want all marijuana prisoners released, and we want no more going in. And it's up to you people out there. If you want to bring about a change, you got to do something. You got to get involved. And there's so many things that you should be getting involved with. We talk about many times on this show the smart meters that are radiating you and spying on you. You people got to get involved and say no to the smart meters, to the bank scam. You people should be saying right now, we want the banksters that have ripped off the wealth of our country, that have put 14.5 million families out on the street with their bank scam. We want them locked up, we want their assets seized, and we want the homes returned to the people who they've been stolen from. All you people out there that are sitting watching television the nights comfortable in your homes, it's just a matter of time before they collapse the dollar. And when they collapse the dollar, you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage, and the banks are going to be taking your houses. So it's time now for you people, while you're still in your house, to take a stand to get back the people who've lost their houses, get their houses back for them. We want these bankers brought to justice. What do you got to say about that, Paul?
Well, I think one of the most important aspects of bringing the bankers to justice, or anybody who has done socially reprehensible activities, the public and the people who have been harmed have to grow up. They have to become mature. They have to study. They have to understand how they've been harmed. If the people don't understand how they've been harmed, they'll believe every lame story that comes down the pike. And as a result, you won't be able to defend your rights properly. You really don't know the difference between you and a corporation. For example, in my co-op, They have rules for shareholders. And at first, when you buy a co-op and you think, okay, I'm a shareholder, I don't know why they call me a shareholder. I just wanted to buy an apartment, but they say this is how you buy apartments in New York. You get shares. Now, a shareholder then has certain rules. A shareholder is a type of corporation. You can create a company and you can own a company, and then that company that you own can own other companies, and those other companies can own other companies. But the whole idea of registering a corporation is so flesh and blood human beings who are owning these corporations, who are running these corporations, can make moral decisions that are either beneficial or not beneficial. When they're not beneficial for the people, the most extreme example of not beneficial means harming the public, swindling the public, using their position of greater power and prestige in the society not to help the society as the society thinks they're giving them these honored positions, but they're actually using that position to steal from the public. Now, in order to rectify this and to undo this harm, each person that's harmed, one by one, has to stand up. Now, there's a lot of talk about class action suits, but Rod Class, do you want to explain what he told us about class action suits?
No, go ahead. You're doing fine.
Okay, what Rod Class said is that when you do a class action suit and you get a whole bunch of people and people think, oh my God, I can never afford to pay for a lawyer and it drags out and it takes so long, this will be too difficult for me. Therefore, let me sign up for this class action lawsuit. Well, what you do is anything that's adjudicated in a case, any evidence that's been put in, you can't, once that case has been decided, you can't bring that evidence again. That's why if you have a proper forensic examination that's done on your mortgage or your proprietary lease in the case of a co-op, if it's not submitted in a timely way in the court, they can sideswipe you because you don't know the difference between you as a flesh and blood human being. You're not living it. You're not believing it. It's not real to you. You've been told things that are appropriate for corporations, but not for flesh and blood human beings. We don't study civics anymore. If you started to study, you could figure it out. But those who want to keep swindling have a lot invested in keeping you ignorant. And that's when we had a very nice discussion with Ralph Pointer and Betty Davis regarding Lynn Stewart and why she's still in prison and why she's so abandoned in her time of need. Why St. Mark's Church, for example, hasn't thrown one physical event, not one benefit for Lynn Stewart in that beautiful, historic, and very appropriate venue. WBAI was sort of giving marginal support at the Left Forum when they asked me to speak on, I think it was Occupy Ethics. I said, my goodness, I'm not qualified to speak. You should have somebody speaking like Ralph Pointer about Lynn Stewart. Lynn Stewart should have dominated the entire Left Forum event. But instead, I was in California with my mother, and Joe spoke on the panel. But lo and behold, on that weekend, there were 300 panels going on at the same time. That means the Left Forum is a total joke. You can't have an event happening where you bring people together, where you want a collective focus, and then you split the focus up 300 different directions. That's as nasty as the IP address discrimination, where they will decide which little cell phone gets what information. They know the profiles. They know the habits. They know what to entice you with. They know what to keep you busy with. And that's why when you start to see actual venues in Manhattan or venues here, like say up at Andy Lee Field, we just brought up Andy Lee Field last week, but it got us to think more deeply. How do you get a community to be cohesive? How do you get a community to be safe and to be secure? Our feeling is as we were progressing in public access and seeing all of the terrible abuses of rights that have been done, and the town board has looked the other way and perhaps under the table participated. We don't know yet. But whatever it is, we have an analog channel that has been demised. And we've got a digital sub-channel that's been brought in its stead, and it's an inferior signal. And like Randy said last week, the traffic is going somewhere else to some kind of corporate imitation of public access, but it can never be the real thing. As Joe and I progressed with our own lawsuits and we realized how important it was to have knowledge, we started to, our work sort of more morphed into the education and government aspects of the PEG. If you start looking at the contracts, the franchise contracts, because we were very honored that Dee Dee Halleck brought us a crate load so we could really start to study how things have gotten to the condition they've been in right now. It's because you should have a three-pronged approach: public, education, and government. That's the real meaning of public access. And probably even these people were slightly swindlers when they were figuring it out way back in the day when, what was that girl, Coco Crystal? Coco Crystal used to go on public access in Manhattan smoking pot right on air. And, you know, and I even asked her, I said, how could you do that? And she said, I don't know. Well, I think I know. I think at that time that she was smoking pot was the opportunity for the entire population to wake up and to realize if they could just discuss this issue, you didn't have to live under that type of oppression. So by putting it into public education and government, you could have different channels and then get the public all thinking only about the public channel, not thinking about education, not thinking about government. Those channels were sold off. They were sold off for big bucks after people sort of forgot about them. But now we're seeing the dire need for them. So when Joe and I start talking about law or talking about education, the problem in the town hall with that cash register court that's come in is that it doesn't have to be there if people were educated. If people understood what their rights were, you could shut down that whole operation quite quickly. But it's something that you have to do in concert. It's something that you have to do with everybody. Not because the argument isn't strong enough by itself, but because this is a process of enlightenment, of waking up, and of understanding that all our problems have solutions.
And let me jump in on that. The court that we have here is, you people out there in television land, you tend to think, oh, it's a court, it's legal, it's, you know, you kind of, that's the authority, and you bow to it. The court that we have here in Woodstock, along with the court in Kingston and most of the courts here in New York, they're all commercial ventures. They're all criminal organizations. They are there only to make money. The money that they make does not go, if you think when you pay your traffic ticket, that the money that you just paid filled the potholes. It didn't happen, people. It didn't happen. They're finding other ways to get you to pay for the potholes. Meantime, all that money that's going to the court, you should check where it's going. I'm not going to tell you. I know where a lot of it's going, but I'm not going to say. I want you people out there to start doing your homeworks, and I want you to know that when you go into these courts, you're going into a commercial venture that's only there to make money. So if you think when you go in, you're going to have an argument, and that judge is going to go, oh, I see your point, not guilty. That's not going to happen, people, because that judge is saying, well, if I let him go, I don't get a commission. And if I don't get a commission, I can't live like the fat cat up here on the bench with everybody looking up to me like I'm some I'm the judge. And everybody's going to give me respect. And I'll lose all that respect, and I'll lose my pension, and I'll lose all this money. So therefore, fuck you, you're guilty. That's the way it's going to go in court until you people out there start demanding that we have constitutional courts. Our founding fathers set it up so that we would have, what was the courts again?
Common law.
Common law. See, I need Paula to... They set it up so we would have common law courts. And a common law court is supposed to work not where the judge presides and rules and bullies you from the bench, where the judge is going to rule, oh, everything the police officer says is gospel and anything you say is bullshit. No, that's what these judges do because they make money that way. Common law courts were set up so that a jury of the people, I think it's 25, I think it's supposed to be, the main common law juries are supposed to be 25 people. And I think the smallest one you can have is, I think, and I'm not sure on this, is 12. But what happens in a common law court is the complaining party in there, first of all, in order to go in there has to be a victim. Someone has to have harmed someone else, robbed them, hurt them in some way. So now they come in and they say, I got a complaint and I want this heard by the common law court. And the common law court hears both sides and makes the decision. Now, the common law court, it's not like the courts we have where, oh, you're guilty and there's a set sentence and you're going to do time in jail. No, the common law court, what they do is first they say, okay, you have harmed this person. Therefore, you're responsible to make up for that harm. Let's say you damaged someone in a way that it was $1,000. Then the common law grand jury would say, you need to pay that $1,000 to that person because of the damage that you did. And if the common law grand jury decides that a punitive damage, that punishment is necessary, they could say, and on top of that, because you've inconvenienced this person or put them through all this, you got to pay an extra $1,000. And now that person has a choice of either correcting the damage that he's done or paying for it or in some way making up for it. And it's not a jail sentence unless he refuses to do that. Then the common law grand jury can say, well, okay, since you didn't do that, we're going to make you spend some time. But the way it is now, let's say Paula harmed me. She hit me on the head with a frying pan. I went in the hospital and I had all this damages. And I go into court and I say, Paula hit me in the head with a frying pan. I got stitches. It cost me bills for the hospital. Well, the judge is going to say, oh, Paula, you hit him with the frying pan. Okay, the court is going to fine you $1,000, which the court gets. I don't get it for my head. And we're going to put you in jail. And putting Paula in jail didn't do anything to help me, who was the victim. And the fine that Paula got didn't come to me. It goes to the court. So these courts are just commercial ventures that don't do anything for the victim. Where in a common law court, the victim gets compensated. So we need to get rid of all these commercial courts, these criminal operations that we have, and go back to common law courts. And I would recommend all you people check out the common law grand jury people. Do you have the
NationalLibertyAlliance.org.
NationalLibertyAlliance.org. You should go to that website and read up on this. We want you people to get active. Do something out there. Our country is in trouble, and if enough people stood up and started doing things, we could fix it. If we don't stand up and start doing things, it's going to get to where it cannot be fixed, and we're all going to suffer big time.
Now, who's doing a lot is Lydia Radin. She's the producer of Crooked Doctors that comes on every Friday night on the Community Affairs Channel 34. I think at around 7 o'clock, 6:30 or 7. You can double check that.
She's on every night?
No, every Friday.
Every Friday.
Crooked Doctors. And Lydia really was like a duck to water on this grand jury thing. And she is living in Jersey City, but she's thinking of moving to Manhattan. And she wants to start up a grand jury there. So she started to communicate to the people in the NationalLibertyAlliance.org. And they said that Manhattan's so big and so corrupt, we need about 10 grand juries in Manhattan.
Right.
So Joe and I, in the months to come, are going to be giving a lot more attention to grand juries. And I'm starting to look at the model for, in the case of, say, big co-op buildings, like I've got a pretty big building, 79 units, we should be able to get up our own grand jury.
Nope, you can't do
Oh,
that.
you can't do it. You can't be a witch hunt, but we've got to have something
Right,
where people
right.
in co-ops, although they say it can't be a witch hunt, if you kind of think
No,
of
listen
each
to me,
co-op
listen
as
to
a,
me.
no, just listen to me first, and then you can speak.
Okay, I don't want
that.
to lose any more teeth.
Okay, all right, all right. No, if each co-op can be like a mini county, like a county, we can get back to this notion of what it means to have a common law. What we've always been noticing, just because of being dragged all over Ulster County for court, is that, say in the case when Joe went over to Marbletown for the driver's license issue, we didn't have an audience there because we don't broadcast public access in Marbletown. And yet the same criminal judges that we're talking about, Judge Lamb in Saugerties, Donald Williams, the main judge, Michael Jordan, and we do call these judges criminals, and people must have noticed by now how come Paula and Joe are not being sued for defamation of character. It's because we welcome a proper court encounter where someone says, I'm not a criminal, and you've harmed me or whatever, and then we will put forward all the evidence. And so when Joe says that these courts are commercial operations, they're not criminal per se. They only become criminal when you have declared your rights, have said that you reserve your rights, but nevertheless, with sheer force and bullying, you're pushed along to participate in a sandbox that you have no way of winning.
I disagree. They were set up as criminal organizations right from the start.
Yeah, but
they
you
were
can't-
set
you
up.
can't call
They
them-
were set up to scam the public.
Well, that's true. Probably the intention, unfortunately, was that. And that's a very sad reality to face.
And let me jump in. One of the reasons I'll give you as proof that it was set up to be a scam is because they changed the language. So when you go into court, you don't understand what they're saying. Like when the judge says to you, do you understand the charges against you? You've been trained to understand Webster's definition. I understand what you just said. But when a judge says to you, do you understand the charges? He's talking legal speak. He's saying, do you stand under these charges? And that's a trick, to trick you into having jurisdiction over you. Because when you say, I understand, you're saying, I stand under these charges, which gives them jurisdiction, which they would not have except through trickery. So these are commercial criminal operations, and the fact that they have to make a language, their own little legal language, so you don't know what they're saying in court. So when you give
right?
consent without realizing that you're giving consent to them doing what they're doing to you. So at the point that they're doing that, that's fraud, and that makes them criminal operations.
Right, right.
Go ahead.
Okay, no, I see what Joe is saying, and I agree. What I was talking about was if you're just making it into a legal game, if it's just a game where you say, I'm going to play this character and you play that character and so on, and then within that particular play, it starts to the play starts to unfold. But if you start to see that you've been selected right from the beginning to get beat up, to get put in jail, to go
Like
through
if
all
you're
this
black or
trauma,
Puerto Rican,
yeah, and then
or Hispanic, I mean.
then you should have a right to say, I choose not to play an arena where I'm so profoundly disabled. And then they say, oh, you're disabled or you're incompetent? Fine, we'll give you a lawyer. They want to do everything they can to keep you in the game. It's like with Monopoly. I remember playing that, and my brother really liked that game. I got bored pretty quickly. But pretty soon, when somebody owns Boardwalk and Park Place and all of that, it ceases to be interesting game. It's not interesting anymore. Right. So the only way my brother could keep me in is he'd have to kind of lend me money. And even that would get boring after a while. So That's my point. But in terms of intention, yes, it's definitely criminal from the get-go. In terms of just a game, they can say, okay, you can go and have this type of game as long as you swear to the Constitution. Well, swearing to the Constitution means that somebody who comes along within that game and venue who now is going to claim the Constitution as an organizing principle for the rights that they're saying they have,
But they
because
won't
they're
let you
claiming
do that.
them.
They won't let you do that. In a commercial court, they don't have to listen to the Constitution. They're operating under a different set of rules.
Only if you understand the charges. If you don't understand the charges,
Right.
then it's all they've pushed it along and it's null and void. Like when I went before the judge, after she asked me for my name and Joe for his name, and I said, "What's your name?" And the judge wouldn't give her name. She goes, "It's right there," and she points, but she wouldn't say it. Now I could have maybe said it and said, "Is that you?" But it was pretty obvious when I listened to it many times that she wasn't comfortable moving on, having not put her name there. All of these things are due process. And they say, well, you can't argue issues of fraud or standing in housing court. But you can do it indirectly by saying that there's a breakdown in due process. That's the meaning of due process. If they say, do you understand the charges against you?
Never understand the charges.
Yeah, well, that's
Never.
But we're giving you something, a formula. We're giving you a formula. But to understand the meaning of that takes a little more studying. You can do that, say, I don't understand the charges, and be belligerent and put your heels in. But if they're kind of coming at you from different directions, like I heard it recently here at the Woodstock court, where the lady was in the red, in that horrible orange jumpsuit, and she said she didn't understand, and then they went and talked about something else, and I could see the judge picked it up again. And at that point I said, no, she didn't say she understood. So then I could see it was time for me to leave the courtroom because they didn't appreciate me participating. But if you really understand why you say you don't understand, it's because it's fraud. How can you understand an illusion? Nobody can understand something that's not really there. Unfortunately, because the pain and the misery and the agony, and when we say free all marijuana prisoners, it's not right that anybody be smoking a joint and not be thinking about their brothers and sisters who are in prison, some for many long years, for doing that. They didn't do any harm to anybody. There was no crime. It's a commercial operation. So it's not that you want to free people who are harming society. You want to free people who never had a chance. And for sure, people who are creating fraud and perpetrating an illusion, whether it's the American bar or the judges, those are the ones that are causing extreme harm to the people. That's why when I edited the green screen on St. Mark's Church, when I had the camera pointing to the corner, you could see what used to be the 2nd Avenue Deli. It's now Chase Bank. How many banks, how many ATMs do we have all over Manhattan? That's a symptom of a very sick society, that the bank has to move in, that you know, they don't even put up for rent signs because then you would see how bad the economy is. So that you lost the 2nd Avenue Deli because of bank fraud. You can't keep perpetrating an illusion that something is happening where nothing's happening. You can't take a proprietary lease and make 40 photocopies of it, put it into empty trusts, and start to sell those trusts, all of them on Wall Street, while you've destroyed the original proprietary lease. Because if you didn't, whoever is in possession of that lease would be the culprit that should be going to prison for many long years. And none of this is happening, and this is what has to start happening. So I was saying that each co-op building should start thinking about some type of common law something.
And
if it's
no,
not the common...
Organize.
Yeah. So,
All the co-ops should get together and organize. Do you know, if enough people from each co-op, you got shares. If enough people from the co-op get together with the shares, you can vote out the board, who most of the time, the boards that are in there, if they've been in there a long time, they're working with the landlord. And what they do is they keep keeping the building in debt, so your equity is constantly being drained. If the building value goes up, but your equity goes down. The landlord owns the building, but the landlord kind of leases it and sells stock not in the building, because he maintains ownership of the building. So what is all this stock? The stock is just paper that they give you. It's a game. And then they say, okay, well, you're a shareholder, but as a shareholder, you don't really own your apartment, when that's what you thought you were buying when you bought into this. You thought you were getting an apartment, but they'll tell you, no, you don't own the apartment. You just own these shares of paper that without the apartment, the paper is worthless. If the paper doesn't back the apartment, then you bought paper for a whole lot of money that's worthless. And if you took, let's say all the people in the building said, well, we all got these shares and we want to put our shares together. Now we have the most people and the biggest amount of shares, and we control the vote. So we want to take the board of directors out of here. We want to get rid of the management company, who is just there working for the landlord to keep the building in debt, so that you people, your equity just keeps draining away and draining away and draining away. But it's time for all you people out there to start taking these people on. And what they do is they'll keep raising your maintenance, raising your maintenance, raising your maintenance, because they keep running the building into debt. They say, oh, well, we needed a new elevator, when actually they didn't need a new elevator. They sabotaged it. Or we need this, or we need to do these repairs, or we need to put scaffolding, like Paula's building. We've had scaffolding on the front of our building and the back of our building for almost 2 years, and no work is being done, but the co-op is paying for that scaffolding. And because that scaffolding costs money, everybody's maintenance goes up, and that's how they keep the people from actually owning the building. The people, if let's say there's 100 shares of stock and there's 100 apartments, and each apartment has 1 share. Well, if the building becomes worth, let's say everybody bought in and it was $1 million when they bought in. 10 years later, the building is now worth $10 million. But all your shares still don't come up to $1 million, because they've drained you every month, maintenance, and when you can't afford the maintenance, now you're out. They're evicting you, and they're taking your apartment and they're selling it to the next sucker who comes along that gets caught up in this scam. It's time for all the people who have co-ops in New York to get outraged and start taking it on, take on the politicians, tell them we want protection for co-op owners. Right now, it's set up so that the landlords control the buildings, the landlords control the maintenance, and they bring in these dictatorial dictatorial management companies to lay all kinds of rules on everybody in the building. You can't smoke in your own apartment. You can't this. You can't that. You can't have pets. You can't this. Now you just paid $250,000 for stock, and you think you own an apartment, and now you can't have pets in your apartment. You can't smoke cigarettes in your apartment. You can't this and this and this. Like Paula's apartment, you can't paint your door, which Paula painted her door, but...
No, after housing court, I was so happy.
Right. Now, why does a building, if a building has a board of directors who are supposed to be taking care of the building, why does the board of directors turn it over to a management company who's now making money that your maintenance is higher because you have to pay for that maintenance for that management company? Now, if the board of directors are supposed to be the board of directors for the building, the board of the directors should say, oh, well, we need a repair. Let's say there's a hole in the step and it needs to be repaired. The ice cracked it and now it's looking terrible and it needs to be repaired. Why can't the management company, the board of directors of the co-op, hire someone to fix it? Why do they have to have a management company to hire somebody? Now the management company's getting paid, and then the person who's fixing it's getting paid. So that's two bills that are coming to you people in all your co-ops. And these management companies have become so dictatorial and so corrupt in their practices, and you people just keep putting up with it.
I think it's going to take more people like me and Joe, I don't know how many more people, to actually address the root cause, which is fraud. And it's a very unpleasant topic. Nobody wants to think about it. I didn't want to think about it. I mean, I've known this board ever since I moved in for 15 years. When I first moved in and I had my stunning $5 million portfolio, I was invited to be on the board. So later on, when you start educating yourself and start understanding what's really happening, it's a really tough thing, because I believe this all boils down to eyeball. It's got to be human beings sitting down and working it out with other human beings. Joe was describing the common law courts. The common law courts are human beings who take very seriously some type of imbalance in the community that has been brought to their attention. And they're striving, like all, productive and prosperous and free human beings would, to get rid of the unpleasant problems so we can all get on with being productive, not to make a career out of creating problems. So you look for the remedy, you look to fix it. Now, I believe I had heard that my building was probably worth $5 or $6 million, just the building. So when I was sitting there, for the other side of the street sweeping once, early in the morning, I started to do some math, and I realized if you took everybody's shares in their apartments, it would add up to much, much more than $5 or $6 million for the building. So then recently somebody else told me that she's in a co-op that has 12 apartments. Each apartment's worth $1 million. And yet she saw that similar buildings on her block with that 12 apartments were selling for $35 million. Well, how could 12 times 1 should be $12 million. So 35 million is, it doesn't make sense. Whereas in my building with 79 units and none of them really being less than $500,000, why was the building priced so low when someone told me that was the value of a building? Now, I think it's whether you play the game legally and lawfully, or whether you do all this under-the-table securitization, and which I think fraud, unfortunately, is getting to be the norm. And that's why I said also in the show last week, a court should be more vigilant than the rest of society to find fraud. They shouldn't say, oh, this is housing court, you can't bring up issues of fraud, or you can't, point this out or that out. Eventually, something just as simple as saying, I don't understand why I'm here, is another language for saying this is fraud. Because I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand. Right. How can we be brought in here? If I was asking the bank for 2 years for a note, what did this person who purports to have bought my apartment, what did he buy? What did Louis Cesarino buy?
Right.
What did he buy? That's what I mean about fraud.
Tell the story of Louis from the beginning.
Well, you tell it, because you've got it fresh in your mind.
All right.
How to make this
the bank was telling Paula that they were going to foreclose on her, and they were going to, and Paula kept.
The bank never told me they were going to foreclose on me. They never did. What started it was my locks were changed in 2004 when I was in India, and then when I started to learn more about foreclosure, I looked at one of my receipts when I put my mortgage in, my payment, and the receipt said, thank you for your payment. and it's not necessarily going to where you think it's going to go. It didn't quite have that language, but that's what it said, and I thought, wow. So I wrote them a letter and I said, well, if it's not going to where I think it's going or whatever, can you please explain what's going on? Because I realize I know very little about the loan that I got. So then they wrote back for 2 years saying they're trying to find it. Then when I started litigation against my board for changing my locks in 2010, because I was waiting to get back in the bucks to where I could pay lawyers $350 an hour to start this, but that day was gone, and I met Joe instead, and he was so much better than massive amounts of law firms. So I started to realize what was going on in marijuana busts were similar to what was happening in foreclosures. So pretty soon the bank started telling me they couldn't provide my note because it was in litigation. Well, I go, yeah, but that's my litigation. I'm the one that was asking for subpoena ducis tecum. So rather than provide me with what I needed for my litigation, while I was in California, apparently I was never notified. I never saw the publication dates, all of what's supposed to happen. It was sold more or less on the courthouse steps. It's actually probably in room 160 or whatever is the motion support office. That's how it happened.
Which was basically legal. But the point, Paula had been asking the bank for 2 years to provide us with the note with the wedding signature. Proof that they had standing, that they actually have the mortgage, and and also we want them to prove that they actually gave Paula money, because most of the time they didn't actually give people money, but that's another show. But anyway, she was asking them to produce the note, produce the note, produce the note. They kept sending letters. We can't find it, we can't find it, we can't find it. And then all of a sudden, we get a letter from this guy, Louis Zassarino, saying that he bought the apartment and that he...
No, we don't get a letter, we get a phone call.
Oh, right, a phone call.
Louis puts nothing in writing, very little in writing.
Yeah.
Fraudulent, get out of your apartment notices, but...
Right, but anyway, Louis tells us that he bought the apartment and that we got to get out. And we said, well, how did you buy the apartment when the bank couldn't provide the note? And the bank supposedly took Paula's apartment without any judicial hearing, without a court saying you have the right to take that. They just went and sold her apartment well, they didn't really sell the apartment because they don't have the note.
Because Joe kept saying, well, what did you buy?
Well, right, I kept telling Louis, well, if the bank don't have the note, what did you buy? And if you can't produce the original note, but then Louis thought he was slick, and somehow he got the co-op of Paula's building, the board, to issue him stock certificates. Well, if the bank didn't really have the note, and the bank really didn't have the authority to sell the apartment, then for the co-op to all of a sudden issue new stock certificates to Louis and just say, well, okay, Paula's stock certificates are worthless anymore. Louis now has valid stock certificates. That makes the board, the co-op board, those involved, Vincent DeVito and the treasurer, and anybody involved in transferring these, that was stock fraud people, that they made up false stock certificates and gave them to this guy Louis, who now thinks he owns Paula's apartment. And he's given us, first he gave us a 10-day notice, then he gave us another 10-day notice, then he took us to housing court, and we did the old, we don't understand what we're doing here, and we said we want Louis's lawyer, we want him Mirandized because he's going to commit felonies, and we want him to be Mirandized because when he commits felonies, we want to hold it against him. And, well, the judge kind of didn't really want any part of that, and she found a good reason to say, well, this is not the place for this argument. You got to take it to another court. So that judge told Louis's lawyer to take this argument to either the Supreme Court or civil court. Now, after he had been told the legal way to do it on Christmas Eve, he came and posted another harassment letter on Paula's door, which says, you got
On my door that says Occupy 26 Gramercy Park.
Yeah. He said, you got 30 days to get out. Well, we're going to mail this copy of this to Lewis. Lewis, we're not leaving. You're the one that bought a bogus. You got swindled by the bank, Lewis. They sold you what they don't own. And the board gave you stock when they didn't have the authority. They weren't in a position. They fraudulently issued you stock. So all your paperwork is worthless, Lewis.
And we sent a cease and desist to Carol Tuccillo of Argo Management, so she knows, to Vincent DeVito, of course, to the board president, but also to Alex Lukovic, the super, because we showed him an envelope and we said, is this your handwriting? Because it gave the 26 Gramercy Park as his return address. He works there, he doesn't live there. Well, he looked at that and he said, I never sent that. So that means somebody was using the super as a front for fraud. And, obviously the super wasn't too thrilled with me calling all this to his attention. But I must say, he's looking a little more relaxed lately because prior to all of this happening, they were leaning on the supers so much. You got to, do this to this person and do this to that person, and people were moving in and out just like the hot sheet hotel that I was accused once of running when I was in India for them to flimsily cover for them having changed my locks. It's a sad, sad situation, but when people start to stand up for their rights, even if you're an employee, if they're legitimately standing up for rights and they're legitimately not trying to swindle, by you cooperating with their rights, it will only empower you. Carol Tuccillo never leaves any notes anymore. Every other day you always saw something from the management company. Do this, this is going to happen, the water's being turned off or whatever. They found condoms in the top floor, so people are sneaking into the building, so we need more security, all of that stuff. We don't hear anything from Carol Tuccillo anymore. So that means that once you have been informed about fraud, even if you're not a judge, even if you're a regular person, that's alarming. You should do something about that. That's why I believe that we're not hearing much from Carol Tuccillo, because now we're naming names.
Yeah, and we want all the people out there. In New York right now, 90% or about 80% of the buildings in New York, the apartments, are cooperatives. And all the whole cooperative thing was set up to be a scam. It's a swindle, people. When you people really study what's going on and find out that you bought into a swindle, you didn't buy an apartment, you bought pieces of paper that are worthless. And go ahead.
Well, even pieces of paper, that's why you have a Securities and Exchange Commission. There's rules for that. So, you have to know which hat you're wearing. Even, just because you're a shareholder per se doesn't mean you were swindled. It's the way they're using this to sometimes say you're the owner when you have owner liabilities, but when they want the benefits of ownership, then there's this mysterious landlord that's always sort of lurking in the shadows. That's the meaning of subpoena ducis tecum. It means let's bring all of this into the light. Let's find out what is the relationship of the attorney to his client, and then what is the client standing as your debtor. That's what it means. A right to face your accuser means the one who says you have a debt to him. You have a right to know who you have a debt to. Otherwise, you're clearly a slave. And if you're a slave, you can't incur debt. As a slave, you don't have the ability to make a contract, so you can't get into debt. Your masters have to pay your debts. So it can't be both ways. So it's not that you bought worthless pieces of paper. Just because Vincent DeVito made up a new fraudulent stock certificate doesn't mean that stock certificates per se are fraudulent. It's just that, I've been living there for 15 years. I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to the banks and to maintenance. And at the end of the day, I discover, what do I have to show for it? Absolutely zip, zero, nothing. That doesn't make sense. And that's why you start to study it. And that's why when the lawsuit was first put in, the attorney that helped me do it didn't know anything about bank fraud. And he was very surprised that my motion for a $2 million remedy, there was a reply in opposition, but there were no counter motions. A counter motion means you have to put a name to it. Once you've put a name to that, all of your accusations you're responsible for. And that means you would be responsible for the landlord, and you could trigger a $2 million remedy, which has now been bumped up to $4 million because I found out that the banks were involved.
Yeah, it's outrageous, but we really need you people out there in television land to start taking up these battles. If they're telling you that you need to be evicted, don't just roll over and say, well, they're telling me I got to get out, so I'm packing and I'm getting out. Take them on. Learn law. 90% of the evictions that have been done, or the bank foreclosures that have been done, were fraudulent, people. But yet most of those people, when the bank said, well, you owe us money, get out, they didn't know how to challenge it. So we would recommend you go to Rod Class. There's who else on banking fraud?
Well, so many people are doing it. Angela Stark does it with her radio show.
Yeah.
My Private Audio. She's got a good.
My Private Audio. Angela Stark has a lot of shows on it.
Bill Windsor.
Bill Windsor.
Everybody's dealing with foreclosure. That is the issue.
Study that, because there are a lot of arguments that you can use to keep these people from taking your property, to keep these people from scamming you. But if you just say, oh, well, first of all, when you go into court, if the judge starts talking money, do you owe money? Did you pay it? You're going to lose, because you're going to be honest and say, well, yeah, I didn't make a payment, and the judge is going to rule for the other side. But if you say, before we talk equity, that's money, I want to talk standing. I want this bank to prove that they have the note with the wet ink signature, to prove that they have all the documents that they actually gave me money. And if they can't supply it, then you win. Anyway, Joe Barton for Pot Talk. We got to sign off. Have a good night.
Bye.
You've been watching Pot Talk with Joe Barton, starring Joe Barton, and also starring Paula Gloria. And we hope you'll tune in next week at this same time on this same Sovereign channel for more Pot Talk with Joe Barton, which is a Manifestation production.